Right, I think it's 12 and I can begin. Kia ora and welcome. It's a good morning for all of you who are still in Tokyo, Japan. It is a good afternoon. We've just touched afternoon at 12 p.m. here in Auckland, New Zealand. And a very early good morning to Prof. Dr. Afnit from Singapore, and to the others, a good day to all of us. This panel is on navigating AI in higher education, multiple perspectives from policy to practice. Just a brief background to the panel. Artificial intelligence, AI, has become a major topic in the daily news flow and in policy debates. This discourse holds significant implications for higher education. However, references to AI in the literature are often vague and open to debate. The discourse of imperative change outlines how AI is seen as an inevitable change to which all must respond. Higher education literature helps shape research, policy, and practice, and discourses about technology can be so powerful. This panel examines the complex nature of AI and will provide some insight into how AI-mediated technologies is understood and used in higher education. The discussion also provides a platform for scrutinizing the role of AI in higher education from multiple perspectives, from policymakers, educational leaders, and practitioners or educators at grassroots level. The panel speakers will discuss the potential and challenges of using AI in actual higher education settings. It will also throw light on how collaboration safeguards the responsible and appropriate use of AI technologies in higher education. It is envisioned that this panel discussion will serve as a catalyst for further discussion on a more refined understanding of AI as a tool that facilitates learning. In a fast-moving AI world, AI must not be ignored as an innovation in education and needs our special attention. It is proposed that this discourse will have significant implications for higher education because it will help shape policy and practice on the appropriate use of AI at grassroots level. Welcome in what we hope to be an interesting and robust discussion on how we are navigating AI in higher education, tapping on multiple perspectives from policy to practice. I would like to introduce the panelists for this panel. We have Prof. Dr. Karine Afnit from Singapore. Prof. Afnit is an associate professor at the Singapore Institute of Technology. She is a faculty member in the university's Infocom Technology Cluster, as well as deputy director at Tech in the SIT Teaching and Learning Academy, where she works with a team of educational developers, educational technologies, and software developers to support and equip educators in the adoption of technologies for teaching and learning. Prof. Afnit advises the university on the framework, policies, and practices relating to the use of generative artificial intelligence in the university. Her research and work as an educator at STI has garnered awards. She's the recipient of SIT's Teaching Excellence Award 2015, 2017, 2019, and a member of the Teaching Excellence Award Honor Roll for 2018 and 2020. Our second panel speaker is Kylie Smith. She's the head of school for education and social work at Manukau Institute of Technology, MIT in New Zealand. She has dedicated over 25 years to education and teaching, beginning her career as a teacher of children before transitioning to teaching adults at MIT for the past 13 years. Kylie Smith's academic journey and research interests have consistently centered around fostering her own love of learning and supporting others in their own educational pursuits. As a current head of school, she leads a diverse group of tertiary educators. Her leadership focuses on bringing out the best in each team member, creating a high-performing, goal-oriented team that places students at the heart of all they do while aligned to the same core values. Kylie is passionate about promoting excellence and ensuring that Akuanga are well prepared for their professional journeys. Kylie is also passionate about advocacy in leadership. The introduction to AI was an opportunity to consider its ethical use from various perspectives, including student and lecturer. This informed the leadership of a multifaceted school curiosity that looks at practical application and integration, not limited to, but including the use of AI in support of assessment and deepening critical thinking. Consideration for how to review and understand assessments that may result in high AI generative scores, and providing opportunities and scenarios to understand AI better and move forward with this ever-evolving technology. Our third panel speaker is Dr. Fiona Westbrook. She is an early childhood education lecturer at Auckland University of Technology, IUT, in New Zealand. Her research focuses on ECE, on early childhood education teachers, political dialogues marginalizes voices, satire, and workforce political issues guided by Mikhail Baklin's dialogism. Dr. Westbrook explores these dynamics through social networks and digital visualities, contributing to visual pedagogies and post-digital possibilities. She's also developing research projects on AI image creation as narrative storytelling, engaging with symposiums, talks, and podcasts to explore AI's intersection with education. This work aims to integrate AI technologies into visual pedagogies, enhancing narrative techniques and educational practices. Dr. Westbrook currently serves as Vice President of the Association of Visual Pedagogies, co-edits the Video Journal of Educational Pedagogy, and has developed initiatives like the IUT ECE newsletter to strengthen sector partnerships. I am the moderator and also the chair for this panel, who have extensive interest in optimal teaching learning spaces, teacher identity and teacher motivation, and a reconsideration of teacher education as a holistic endeavor. I'm currently investigating the role of teacher identity, teacher motivation, and the teacher's perception of advocacy in the teaching role. An emerging area of interest, of research interest, is investigating the human in the person who teaches in a fast evolving AI teacher education environment. So welcome all to the panel. And as you can see from the diverse backgrounds of our panel speakers, this will be an interesting multi-perspective type of a dialogue conversation that we are going to have today. So moving on to the first part of the discussion. Start to adjust my headset. All right, so what we're going to do is we're going to discuss around three areas. We're going to talk about policy, and we're going to talk about practical implications of AI being integrated into education within our institution or within our country, and also the ethical implications of integrating AI into higher education. We are going to start the discussion with the first question, and I would like to ask Corinne the first question. Thank you. What are the current policies governing the use of AI in higher education in your institution or your country? Can you highlight the journey, both the challenges and success stories at the policy making level? Over to you, Corinne.
Thank you, Susie, and good morning, everyone. Coming from Singapore, Singapore is a very proactive place when it comes to education policies, and I would say policies in general. And indeed, we started our journey very early. If we're talking about timeline, we all know the big bang of ChatGPT happened in November 22, and in December 22, I was already presenting to our educational policy committee to explain what this is about and how this is going to affect us. By January, we were running sharing sessions for all of faculty to make sure that we understand what is in front of us, understand what this may mean, especially for assessments at first stage, to understand whether our assessments are still valid, whether they still make sense. Are we still assessing the learning outcomes that we think we are? And very quickly, we came out with a position paper. I'll share a screen just to show what it looks like and a few things about it. All right. So the actual document may be challenging to share in this format, but it does exist and it has a lot of pages and topics, but perhaps in an easier way to digest. We can have a look at this. This came out in early April 23 as a document to help everyone understand what is our stand, how do we see this, what should be the approach that everyone should adopt towards the use of generative AI in teaching and learning. This was also accompanied with an email to all students to help them understand that A, we are aware, B, we expect you to be aware, and C, there are specific practices that we expect to see and not to see coming from students. And from the start, I think at this stage around the world, there were places where they were banning use of ChatGPT or blocking it in access, but we kind of realized this is not going away, and we might as well learn how to live with it and how to leverage the advantages that it provides us, and not try to pretend that it's not here. And so really embracing the technology was the main point that we were making from day one. We identified three main focus areas around generative AI, or the way that generative AI is going to affect us as educators, with the first really urgent and requirement step, and that is looking into assessments, making sure, as I mentioned, that they are still valid, that when we're asking students to demonstrate the capability to do something, they are really demonstrating their own capabilities and not something else. So that was the first step. And immediately we came out with a requirement for all academic staff to demonstrate competency when it comes to evaluating their own assessments. And so this is an exercise that is still going on. Every academic staff at SIT has to submit a bit of a portfolio that shows how they examine a specific assessment within their modules, in what way they test it against different tools, whether they made any changes recently, what have they learned through that, reflect a bit about the way that we assess to make sure that we all have the tools to manage education properly in current days. The second area of focus is on discovering the different opportunities that it provides for teaching and learning. This, for me, is the fun part. We prototype a lot, we explore, we buy new tools, we build our own tools, to make sure that we're really not missing out on opportunities here to rethink what education can look like now that such tools are available to us. In the slightly longer view perspective, really rethinking what all of this means for our learning outcomes. Do they need to change? Do they need to update? SIT is the University of Applied Learning. We pride ourselves on the fact that our students are ready for the industry. Now, the industry these days is changing, and we need to make sure that we understand this change, that we help perhaps inform this change in terms of what our graduates are expected to do in the workforce, what skills they're supposed to have. This is in terms of just generic workplace skills. We know that now things can be much more efficient than they were previously, but also within the specific discipline. What does it mean to be a software engineer in a world where generative AI exists? What does it mean to be an accountant? In what way do we leverage on such things? The approach that we take in our policy is, first of all, context-based. We do not have any overarching rules for the entire university where we say everyone has to do A, B, and C when it comes to generative AI, recognizing that it is really very much context-specific. So people who teach communication skills need to address the use of generative AI very differently from the way that people who teach engineering. There are cases where you would say, okay, I have to ban the use of generative AI tools because I'm assessing now basic thinking skills or things of that sort, whereas in other places it would not make sense to ban the tools at all. So we did not come up with any rules. We basically set out what principles we think people should follow. I'll mention a few things about that, and not impose specific rules. But that also means that we have to have a very open discussion with students, not to confuse them. How come in one module I'm allowed to use it, in another I'm not? And so the discussion both of what skills are expected to have within the context of the module that they're taking and things of that sort. This is very important when you don't have clear rules that you can just say, okay, that is the rule for everyone and this is how we go. As I mentioned, a part of our approach is to make sure that everyone is informed. These tools are different. We have to understand what they are making possible, both good and bad. And so there is a requirement for all academic staff to upskill, and also for all students, there is an AI literacy course that is a part of a university-wide requirement for everyone. And finally, the idea of collaborative learning for all of us as academic staff. This is a field where no one is really an expert. There are no best practices. No one can tell that over time, this is the right way to teach and not that. And so it's really important that we share our practices and grow collaboratively, not just within SIT, but within the Singapore community and within the international community as well. So just quickly examples of some principles that we adopted. First of all, that humans remain in charge. Whether you're an instructor or a student, you're welcome to use these tools, but at the end of the day, you have to own what you're saying. So for example, we do not rely on AI for marking. We can be assisted by it, but at the end of the day, a mark has to be something that an instructor can say, I actually stand behind it. Another example here is the idea that foundational skills are still valuable, even though computers can now do some things much better than how we do them. We still value the idea of developing communication skills, developing programming skills, all those foundational skills that really help us develop our own way of thinking and our own even personality, I would say. And lastly, I think, which is where everyone went immediately, and of course, there's no way of denying that, the idea of academic integrity. How do we make sure that we're still enabling correct, valid, reliable assessments with students? So this is mostly the journey that we've been taking with the policy related to generative AI. We did not need to actually come up with an actual policy paper. This guideline so far stood as sufficient enough for everyone to understand where things are heading, of course, with a lot of professional development activities for academic staff. And we're now coming up with the use of AI framework for the entire university, but that is not specific to teaching and learning. That is for the university as an institution, including the administrative side and all of those things. So far, we're actually drawing a lot from the academic side that had to move much quicker than everything else.
Thank you, Karine, for that insightful description of policies that are made at your institute, and I think it's also common across the higher education providers in Singapore. I'm just wondering if the other two panelists would like to talk a little bit about, as you reflect on policy and how you actually bring it to life at implementation level, have you noted whether there are actually challenges where policies actually becomes an obstacle to the implementation of AI at grassroots level? You've got something to celebrate that you like to share. Our time is kind of running up, so if you could do a little bit of 3 minutes between two of you, or only one of you is fine. Thank you.
It's really interesting, Karine, listening to how fast your institution moved on these policies. So at AUT, we've just recently had kind of a module available to students. I can share it, and it's all around that academic integrity being, that key concern that happened. We are seeing, you can, once you know the format of AI, you can see it coming through in students' work, and now it's the question of, is this cheating? Is this thinking? Initially, my university were quite nervous about Grammarly, so there can be this pre-AI, not generative AI, before that. So I can just share my screen. So this is what we've got at AUT, and you can kind of see it's around assessments, and it's specifically for students, and it's like this what to do and what not to do, and then kind of moves through these points. I'll sort of leave that there. But what I think is interesting as well is actually as of yesterday and the week before, AUT has just paid for a consultant to come and talk to us on AI and how we as lecturers can use AI. So you're even before that. We've, this kind of how students should use it has only just came out in September this year, and really driven by the library as well, thinking about academic integrity again. And now it's like, oh, how can lecturers? So we're still in this process phase, and it's so fascinating to see such a developed plan that's so concise. So that's sort of what's happening here. It's this, where do we step? Where do we go? And some people have a lot more literacy than this than others. Definitely going to that session, I was thinking, oh, that's not what AI is to some colleagues who obviously have skills in different areas. So I think it's going to be this kind of, really, really interesting space.
Always great to go last.
Kylie? Yes.
Thanks,
Kylie?
Susie. Because what I've really enjoyed about, Karen, what you talked about is embracing new technology. And I think sometimes, and Fiona, you've talked about this as well, that not everyone's at the same level. So certainly here at MIT, we do have a statement in a policy in our student regulations, but it's very broad. So essentially it says that along the lines of that the school, individual schools can determine how AI is used in assessment. But that, of course, academic integrity is upheld. Now, that's a really, really broad statement, and it caused us perhaps some consternation about how we might deal with that. That's actually only very recent. So, Fiona, as you talked about, MIT is only progressing down this road really this year. However, as a school, we've been thinking about it for the last 18 months because, of course, we start to see it in assessments, and we're needing to think about, well, how are we going to be punitive in the fact that we're going to be seeing students as using these tools for cheating, or are we going to embrace it and think about how we then integrate it in an ethical way and be able to teach students how to use it, but use it to our advantage as well? So that whole multifaceted approach about how we as the teaching team use it, but also how students can harness it is so important. And I think we're certainly here at MIT and within the School of Education, we're thinking about how do we manage both of those things so that actually there's some joy in being able to engage with the new technology, not the fear of a new technology. So I think certainly from an MIT perspective, we are heading down that road, but perhaps at the School of Education slightly ahead of the Institute in terms of how we're working with it. Thanks, Susie.
Thank you. So we can see even within the first 15 minutes of our conversation, the perspectives and the rate by which AI policies are coming out across institutes and across countries is actually quite different. But what is empowering to hear is that mostly we are empowered to actually contextualize, and it's not just fix rules and regulations, but it's contextualized according to principles. Thank you for that. So I'm moving on to the second question. We are moving on to implementation now. So we're moving from policy to, okay, we've got the policy now. So when we are focused on implementing the policies, can the panelists, but I will start with Kylie. Can you please share a successful, it can be a successful example or challenging example of how AI is implemented in your institution? So it could be something that is exciting, successful, something that you're challenged, or it could be an innovative process. Any of them. Kylie, over to you.
Thank you. Actually, I think it's a combination of all of those things. It's a challenge, it's a celebration, and it's an innovation all at the same time. I think as others have talked about, the challenge with AI is that it's evolving so quickly, and there is no way, I certainly haven't felt from my own perspective that I can stay ahead of it. I can sort of stay alongside it and maybe trail at some points. But certainly one of the things that we have really tried to do as a school is try and engage with it. So knowing that everyone's at a slightly different point in terms of their own journey with how they'd like to integrate it into their classrooms, into assessment work, we've tried to develop a bit of a plan in terms of how we actually engage with it consistently. So we're constantly talking about it. It's an element on meeting agendas. It's actually a standing item now, because it started off 18 months ago with these are the kinds of things I'm seeing in misconduct. So these are the things to watch out for. So it was very punitive, as in things like seeing Americanized spelling, which of course here in New Zealand we don't expect to see, or words or language that we wouldn't necessarily expect to see. The use of the word diaper instead of here in New Zealand we would use the word nappy. So little things like that we would be looking out for. Things like seeing white text in between words as a method of hiding the use of an AI tool. So what I had started with was these are the things that you might want to watch out for when you are reviewing your assessments prior to marking. Thankfully, I think we've moved on a fair amount from that while there are still examples and scenarios that we discuss as a teaching team, that fear of or the anxiety around, oh goodness, what happens if actually a student goes through this assessment and we find out later that it was completely AI generated and it wasn't their own thinking and that wasn't their own words. What I think we do quite well here is we're a relatively smaller organisation. We know our students very well. So we know the language that they speak, and but by that I mean how they would talk to us. So we're lucky that we're not in classes of 150 or 1,000 students. We know our students well enough to know that if we were conversing with them, is this the kind of the language that they will be using in their assessment work. So it's not to say that they're not using Grammarly to make adjustments and things like that with their assessments, but we would have a good understanding through formative feedback and tutorial sessions about what we would expect to see. So therefore, some of the tools also about plagiarism detection have also advanced. So we use Turnitin here at MIT. Just this year, there's been the introduction of the AI generation tool to be able to see or give a percentage of how much of the assessment may be AI generated or assisted. That hasn't come without some challenges. It's not as straightforward as it sounds. You know, if a student has a 66% rate of AI generation, actually that doesn't necessarily mean or progress to misconduct. So one of the things that we've certainly done within the school is really try and create a framework of this is what you're looking for if you're looking at assessments. And again, knowing that actually we're going to continue adding to that framework because things will change so quickly. But things like actually asking the students to collect or have drafts of their work or version control so that we can go back. There is the other option that we haven't used yet, the two-lane approach where they submit an assessment first and then they can use AI tools to be able to improve writing or spelling and all of those kinds of things. We haven't gone down that track yet, but there is that possibility. We're also asking students to actually be really transparent about their use of AI. So we've reintroduced, it feels a little old school, going back to using a cover sheet. Have they used an AI tool? And if so, which one? That also helps the teaching team to look at more subjectively at the assessment to go, okay, I have a better picture of how that may have informed this assessment. Some of the teaching team are also looking at how they're integrating AI into assessment instruction. So certainly in the third year of our degree programs, both our degree programs for primary and early childhood, students are being asked to use AI in the development of an assessment and then being able to then critique that whatever AI is generating for them. So I think, again, we're approaching things in terms of creating a framework for how we might like to introduce AI to students across the 3 years of a degree program, that it might start with, you know, how and why, or what, progressing towards year 2 and 3 where we're actually using it for research, or where we're starting to use, we're critiquing or we're providing scenarios that we're then critiquing or creating personas. So it's really an evolving thing. And what I think we've really tried hard to do at MIT, particularly in the School of Education, is we're treating this as a curiosity. What do we want to know and how do we find that out? And how do we play? How do we knowing that different people will be at different parts of that journey, but actually any of that is okay as long as we're not shying away from it. That's certainly some of the challenge, celebration, and what we're doing here. Thanks, Susie.
Thank you, Kylie. So it's obvious we can see that we are all empowered to actually bring to life the policies in different ways, in creative ways, and it's actually quite contextualized, and it is always still evolving. I remember Corinne, you're talking about the fact that the reality is that it's moving so fast. And when we talk about today, very soon it becomes a tomorrow conversation. Thank you for that. I'm just wondering if the other panelists would like to contribute with an example of how it has been challenging. That means bringing to life a policy. Could be something that actually you'd like to share with us as something that is innovative.
I can give this a try, Fiona, if
Yeah.
you don't mind. I think in terms of challenges, you were saying, because this changes so quickly, we tried to come out with an academic guide for how to use generative AI in teaching and learning. And we found ourselves for a few months not publishing it because every time we thought we were ready, we realized actually it is not relevant anymore. And so at some point we decided we're never going to actually have the perfect guide. And in fact, we're basically just giving our own impression of what makes sense, not really sharing any universal truth. And so instead we decided to publish a working document as a guide for everyone, giving everyone editing rights to help add comments, add from their own experience, so that it's really more a conversation than a transmission of information about it. So that was, and it is really very challenging. As we said, Kylie, I don't expect to ever be really in front of it or ahead of it. I'm constantly trying to update myself and make sure that I'm not missing out on something big that just happened. And so I think this should be really the expectation from academic staff generally as well, that at least, stay minimally informed so that you're not missing out on the bigger things. In terms of exciting things, we actually came up with what we call the cluster challenge or the AI challenge. We asked all academic staff to propose their dream project when it comes to using AI in their own disciplines. As a competition, we awarded 4 different projects with overall around $1 million to implement their dreams, and we're working with them on this now. So that was really exciting for us to see not only the 4 that actually won this challenge, but the over 20 different suggestions that people came up with. And this is now really a bank of dreams that we have, that as soon as we have the bandwidth and the resources to fund, we have a lot of exciting things to work on.
Thank you, Corinne. Fiona, would you like to say something? Fiona, would you like to say something on this? Yeah.
Yeah, so I just think it's really interesting in a way, because especially listening to you, Kylie, how, embracing that aspect with students. I would say even, but MIT not yet having this loose policy, whereas at AUT, sort of sitting between MIT and you, Karen, at SIT. But actually it's really underground how students use generative AI. So it's like one of those things, don't tell anyone, and because of that, it's the thing that exists but isn't talked about, is the sense I'm really getting. Also, not just students' work, but for the video journal that I am a co-editor of. I mean, we're starting to see things where we're questioning, is this AI? And so we came out with this statement that the editor-in-chief decided there should be a statement to disclose if you use AI. But are we going to disclose? Because it is this notion that this computer is doing the thinking and learning for me. And I think, these policies, they need to question what is thinking, what is learning, and what is doing. Because if a student is putting prompts in, getting the work back, if an author to a journal article is doing the same, they're finizing the prompts, they're editing the writing, is that cheating? Should we be so hiding it underground? Like, is there this sense that, I can't tell anyone I used AI? But that kind of exists. And perhaps it is because there are people in this space who don't fully understand how the technology works. Actually, maybe that's all of us, as we've been saying, because I'm not going to pretend I fully or even slightly perhaps understand some of the mechanisms. But yeah, I think maybe it comes down to this deeper question of what is learning, what's intelligence, what is intellectual property. A lot of people will talk about copyright, and if you're using AI, then you're breaching copyright because it is drawing from other people's work. But I've also heard speakers very well versed in this topic say, well, actually we're inspired throughout our work by other people, and that we might not always reference them. but we are gaining from our conversations with them. You know, I might have a conversation with a colleague and go, oh, that's it, I'm going to put that in my paper, but I don't cite that. And so is it copyright, or is it just creating further dialogues to think about learning? So I think it's really complex and asks us to keep thinking. Maybe just as one more sort of thought I had about this is I do worry about it for students in the fact that it might erode their confidence in their own voice. So I don't know if anyone yet has seen the essay a million times over. That's the same essay that's clearly been written. And I just sort of get the sense that, you know, so I've listened to another speaker who was talking about when, you know, Word came up with spell check and put that little squiggly line, the desire to fix the squiggly line, to believe that the computer is right because they spent all this money on the program, they surely must be right, surely you've got it wrong. And I see mistakes in students' work. For instance, for the Indigenous language of New Zealand, they'll often capitalize it because the computer thinks it's a name, not another language. So, you know, it's like the computer's right, I don't know what I'm saying. And so perhaps it will, I get the sense a little bit that students need to be built up, that your voice is still really important, your perspective, this is a tool, but at the end of the day, don't let it feel like it's doing something more than you can do, because that creative subjective space, and especially for teachers, initial teacher education. So yeah, that's sort of some of my thoughts as we're chatting.
Thank you, Fiona. I think we are moving quite smoothly into my third question. That's, I think, Fiona, you've already opened the Pandora's box around ethical implications of using AI, because I think we've already acknowledged that it's actually very complex. And right from the outset, literature has indicated that often our conversations and even professional dialogues around the integration of AI into education is often vague and open to debate. And I remember earlier on in a conversation with you, Corinne, that you did talk about the fact that sometimes when we do not understand AI in depth, then when we're talking, we're actually at cross purposes. I think we're hearing that theme that's coming up. And Fiona, I totally agree with you that even I struggle, and I'm investigating this. That's my current research interest now, is that where is the human in the whole thing? Where is the personal voice of the student? But that's just an initial interest at the moment. So we're moving on to the last question for our discussion here, and it has to do with the ethical implications of the integration of AI into higher education. So the question is, what are the primary ethical concerns associated with the use of AI in higher education? I suppose we're looking at how can we, being responsible guardians of education, how do we ensure that AI is used ethically and responsibly? And unless Fiona needs a rest, would you like to continue with the conversation, Fiona? Thank you.
Yeah, sure thing. So I think already I was sort of thinking of this question, what are the primary concerns? Well, probably different people would say different things. So I'm going to give you what kind of came to mind for me, but really interested to see where that discussion goes. So I think bias and discrimination of AI comes to mind pretty strongly. So, you know, these large language models, the data that they are fed, it has biases in it. And sometimes, especially, you know, before I was saying that this kind of authoritative text that the student takes, or perhaps, you know, the busy person using it, or academic, really got to be careful about what's in it, you know, so kind of perpetuating existing biases. So I think there's a Netflix documentary, which I can't remember the name now, but it's a lady who looked at AI, and it was facial recognition software. She actually realized it didn't recognize anyone who didn't have Caucasian skin. So the data that it was fed simply did not pick this up. They've also seen that when AI was used for parole, that it was much more likely that the AI would suggest that anyone with an African-American name or non-English name shouldn't get parole. And they're using this technology in the US for these kinds of things. And also there was one, I think, where Google advertised a job and tried to get AI to, you know, to kind of do that initial thing. Anyone who had a female's name was excluded from the list, even if they went to a university that had a female name attached to it. So they were just gone, because in the data set, it's men. And there's some quite funny things you can do apparently with AI. If you ask it, for instance, to give you a picture of a doctor, you can kind of imagine the image that it's going to get. If you ask it for women's health, it just doesn't even know what that looks like. So, you know, it's like, but that is going to come through in the students' work, and as well, if we're not really careful about, you know, how we're looking at it. So again, what's the human, and what role do we play? So that's probably one aspect. And then fairness and equity. Not everyone has the same access to the internet. You know, not everyone has the same technology. You know, you can buy paid versions like ChatGPT-4, which is said to be quite a lot better. I mean, there are free versions. I think Perplexity is a really great tool, which is a free version. But if you don't know about it, if you're not having these conversations, then we're going to see that kind of growing. And you know, here in Aotearoa, New Zealand, during the pandemic, we had students learning online, and they said that it was so chronic, the gap between you know, those who were affluent and those who weren't, because they had the technology at home. They knew how to use a laptop. They knew how to engage in these spaces, and that's not everyone's reality. So is it going to put more and more pressure? And I mean, the third point, and then whichever one sparks our interest for this conversation, but the third point I think I want to talk about as well is sustainability. So these large language models use an incredible amount of power. They use a lot of resources. I think they use a lot of carbon emissions, the amount of water that they need to use. And so we're already having these discussions of a planet that is in trouble, and we're adding AI with excitement, and how do we use it? But again, you know, what does that mean for us? So I think for me, those are probably three really big questions. But yeah, what does everyone else think?
Susie, do you want to take yourself off mute?
Yes. All right. Thank you. I think that this topic is quite a huge topic, but I think it is an exciting topic to discuss. Either Kylie or Corinne, would you like to contribute to the conversation?
Sure. Is it okay if I go first, Karen, then maybe, yeah, because actually some of the things that Fiona, you've talked about I was just jotting down some notes. I feel the same way, particularly around equity, but in the same way, but also in a slightly different way. I'm really conscious of if we don't pick up possible use of AI and students end up being able to complete qualifications with actually very little of their own work, perhaps because they had continued cautions, because, you know, teaching teams weren't talking to each other, because it wasn't flagged at any point, you know, whereas there may be other students where it becomes more obvious because they've been less, for the want of a better word, deceptive. That's a disadvantage. Now, I don't want to look at it in that particular way, but I think the reality is that that does exist. There will be certain teaching team members who actually don't want to look at it because it causes them some anxiety in terms of, I'm not sure how to deal with that. I don't know how to prove it, or I don't know how to disprove it. So I think there's some real challenge there in thinking and making sure that we have some equity and some consistency in how we are addressing these things, so that we are really confident that by the time our students complete their qualifications, that this is theirs, this is their work, this is their learning. That's one thing. That whole digital native situation, I think, is really interesting in terms of equity as well. There are even some of our very young students who we expect to be really digitally savvy actually don't have the skills to be able to critique. So being able to make sure that actually, just because you've put into ChatGPT, write me a 300-word essay on XYZ, being able to then critique that and say, actually, that's a fake reference, or that doesn't exist, or actually, I don't believe that. That's so important, and therefore that's the human element. Our job is to make sure that we are and indeed teaching students about not necessarily the right way, but certainly the skills to be able to critique. And I think the big one here in New Zealand and possibly other countries as well is that, you know, the use of AI and cultural appropriation. and data sovereignty, particularly important here. I mean, certainly something that we've seen when we first started talking about this was the use of Te Reo Māori, which is one of our recognised languages here in New Zealand, and also Pacific languages, so Samoan, Tongan, etc. In the last 8 to 12 months, we have seen AI, of course, because it's a large language, they are large language models, be able to really acclimatize well and draw appropriately on some of those things, which actually, is it appropriate? Is it the right dialect? Is it, is it correct? And I think that that's a real challenge and a real ethical consideration. And again, comes back to that whole critique that we need to be continually looking at bias and being able to consider what is truth. So I think I'll leave my speech there. Thanks, Susie.
Thank you, Kylie. Kari, would you like to add on?
Yeah, I think I completely agree with everything that Kylie and Fiona just mentioned. I think perhaps a few other points to augment this, I would say. When we're talking about things like equity and such, I think we really want to make sure that we're also not missing opportunities, because when such new technology is introduced and it suddenly enables a lot of new things, just not being aware of it and not using it, there's something ethically wrong about that as well, right? If I have now an opportunity to provide personal assistance to my students that otherwise I'm not able to provide, but I'm not doing that because I'm not familiar with the with what technology enables me, there's something I would say ethically murky about that as well. So it's not just what not to do with the technology, but also make sure that we are really leveraging on it where we should. On the point of misuse is not only by students, it's also by academic staff. And often really through lack of skills and knowledge about how these things work and what is a right way or a wrong way to use those. I had a very interesting case of an instructor that came to me saying, I asked ChatGPT if it wrote this text and it said no, but I think it did. So basically they suspected the student was using ChatGPT, and they thought, okay, ChatGPT would let me know if it wrote it. Of course, that's not how these tools work, and it just shows the lack of understanding of how we should or should not use them. Completely agree about sustainability, and I think the main point here is to get people, or a lot of different ways to address this, but one big question that we need to be good at is to ask ourselves, what is the model that is sufficient for my needs? There's this, when using these tools, it's very tempting to go for the latest, best, biggest model to get the best possible answer, but in fact, this can be very wasteful, and if you can get your answers from the mini version or from a small, large model, then it's actually much more sustainable than just going for the biggest and brightest.
All right. So I think we had quite a bit of time to actually examine each other's perspectives around the integration of AI in higher education. And it's lovely to see across from Northern Hemisphere across to Southern Hemisphere. And we had a little bit of discussion around policy, practical implications of the policies, and also ethical considerations around the use of AI. And we are just now wondering, since our hope for this discussion is to actually provoke a discussion from those who are actually with us together. We would like to also capture your voice. So we're just wondering, you have questions for us. When I look at the messages, I don't see anything appearing. There's no question sitting there. I'm just wondering, is there anyone who would like to use your microphone to ask any one of the panelists or anyone at all from the panel a question?
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, excellent. I'm from RMIT Vietnam University. So, Karen, can I ask you? You said that at your institution, you have, if I'm not mistaken, then you are like doing a guide of educators so that they can know how to use AI in assessment and teaching. But it's just a working document, and everyone is invited to add comment and feedback. So do you So I'm really interested in that working document. So is there any way that you can share it with a person from external organization like me? And the second thing is I'm just wondering if for that working document, educators do put a lot of comments and feedback and questions on, and do they contribute a lot? And what does it look like now after you collect all the feedback? What do you do with that working document? Like you revise it, or you wait for like some time before you implement it or something? Yeah, thank you. So very long question. Thanks.
Thank you for the question. It has been a journey. Unfortunately, the document is labeled as SIT restricted, so I'm not able to just simply share it. And actually, we restricted it not because we mind sharing with other with other educators. I'm happy to just email it to someone in that sense, but I wouldn't make it public simply because there are some sensitivities in terms of sharing it with the students, as in sharing perhaps too much about the way that we think behind the scenes about these things. It may not be good for them to be exposed to that. In terms of contributions from other faculty, from other academic staff, other faculty members, I would say I felt like they have a fear of showing their name on it. So we didn't get too many edits. We had a few people that kind of really got into this opportunity and added and shared from their thoughts. But I wouldn't say that this is something that the general intended audience was actually taking into, but we do have a lot of conversations with our faculty members. We have a monthly meetup for discussion about generative AI. And so we do collate what we get from these discussions and put it back into the document. So the edits look like they're all coming from Stella, the Teaching and Learning Academy, but actually it is coming from the voices that we are collating from faculty. We do release an updated versions once we see the edits are such that actually it became a different document. And so we're now at version number 3 within a year and a bit of this document. And every version looks completely different from the previous one.
Wow. I'm sorry, can I have a follow-up question? When you said that the previous the new document looks very different from the old one, does it tell us something? Because I think like, because when you issue the document, it has to be based on a lot of thinking and a lot of consideration already. But then the new document is completely different. So it means like too much difference in terms of the insight and everything just come in so frequently, or yeah.
I think we're just maturing in the way that we think about it, right? And so in the first version, of course, a lot of it was how to identify if your students are using such tools and things of that sort, whereas version number 3 is much more about how do I use it in my teaching? How would it help me? What kind of tasks can I use it to help me save time and things of that sort? And so it's really just expanding the way that, and as I mentioned, maturing the way that we think about the opportunities that these tools provide us.
So is it the working document right now? Sorry, a kind of policy, or it's just like a framework that educators can refer to? And
it's just a guide. People are welcome to ignore it if they want, to contradict what it says if they want. It's just there to help those that want to sort of be part of the community discussion around this.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks a lot.
Yeah, thank you for the question. Thank you to Corinne. I think that there was someone else who had raised his or her hand. Dan Lay, is it? Are you still
It's
here?
me. It's me.
Oh, it's you. Okay. All right.
Because I have
Thank you. Thank you. Is there anyone else who has a question for us?
No one has a question.
No? I'm just wondering, could we continue our conversation if there's no question around that buy-in from the teaching staff? Because we can see, I find it quite interesting, a story that's coming from Singapore, from what's that, from Corinne. It has to do with that it's compulsory. It's compulsory to actually weave AI into assessments and so on and so forth. And if I'm not mistaken, in an earlier conversation with you, there's also kind of that it's compulsory to do a PD on it. And so I wonder about how is that buy-in, and whether the approach is different, because we can see that the educators play an important role, but I can see the Singapore experience is that experience. Maybe Tareen would like to say more about that. I don't know whether the others would like to feed in. How do we get that buy-in? Because everyone is at a different stage in the use of technology. Thank you.
Yeah, I would quickly mention, yes, we do have a compulsory course for everyone to complete and a demonstration of competency, as I mentioned, to make sure that at least we protect our assessments, if not anything else. And we do have a lot of professional development around it. I am actually curious with Kylie and Fiona how faculty or academic staff are taking to this, because we see that even though we have a mandatory approach to this, you have to, of course, it doesn't necessarily mean everybody buys into it. They mean they have to do some things, but just like any other tool, we have those that are excited about it and those that we will never get to really appreciate what it does, and most others are somewhere in the middle.
Yeah, I can jump in here. I think to the School of Education at AUT, there's a lot of us who are into philosophy, and so that has I'm suggesting that has caused the kickback perhaps from AI, because it's that what is it to think deeply, what is it to write, what is it to use, and then what is it to learn, coming through in the courses as well, so how we write the courses and whatnot. And so I think there's we don't have to use it, or we've been you know, like I said, we're doing these workshops now at the faculty level, where obviously through that we can see there's an encouragement. But the general consensus is that thinking is something we should do deeply by ourselves. Although I have seen some colleagues, because, you know, now we're having these workshops and I've been encouraging them to kind of have a play with it. I just had one colleague say, "Oh my gosh, I can see why you use this tool." So I think, you know, as they sort of step a toe in, maybe that it's being taken up. So that's what's happening here at AUT.
Perhaps something similar here at MIT as well. I think I'm quite cognizant of making sure that people aren't forced on a particular journey if they are not ready. And certainly one of the things I'm trying to do is make sure that we reach people at the stage that they're at. So whether it's, we've got some, particularly in this school, who are really keen and really reviewing assessments, redeveloping assessments, thinking about how they may integrate and use AI in their courses, which is great. There are others who are still in the playing stage and just seeing how they might use it in classroom settings, so as in creating scenarios, but not used for assessment. Then there are others who are using it themselves, and it might be about their own teaching and learning. So, you know, how are they generating images, as an example, to add to our LMS system, Canvas or PowerPoint or whatever it is that they're using. But also we're trying to be quite conscious of the fact that we're not shying away from the conversation, that actually people will never come along on the journey unless we're open and transparent about its possibilities, sharing some of the things that are working really well, and then people going, "Oh, actually, I think I could do that." And so that whole testing, hypothesizing, refining, actually, I think is going to be a really ongoing process for us. So thankfully, I don't think we don't have anything that's hard and fast yet. However, I can see the absolute benefit of that. And I'm actually now really thinking about creating something, particularly for those who are wanting to use AI in assessment, that there's some kind of tool that they can assess that assessment against. I really like that idea, Karen, as well. So yeah, certainly for us, it's a journey that is not yet over, and I don't think will be over for some time. So I think that's where we are.
Yeah, thank you, Kylie. It's almost 1 o'clock here, and it'll be almost 9 o'clock over in Tokyo. Thank you so much to the panel speakers for this very robust discussion, very interesting, exciting discussion. And as we have said right from the outset, that this we hope will provoke more thinking and thought, and will be a catalyst for us to have ongoing conversations. I'm very sure any of the panel speakers will be happy to receive any emails from you if you would like to continue your conversations around how you navigate this world of AI and use it in the real world of practice. Thank you very much, and have a good day wherever you're at. Bye for now.
Thank you, everyone.